The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom. Rational self-interest. The radical. And individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Sunday, November 2nd. Hope everybody's having a great weekend, had a great week. I know I haven't seen you in a while. I have been traveling around Europe. I am now in Vienna, Austria. Yesterday I did a great event. I just mentioned this. Yesterday I did a really good event in Oslo. We had probably about 250 young people, 15 to 25-year-olds, all members of the youth organization of a classical liberal political party in Norway. Yeah, it was great. I talked about the morality of capitalism. There is video. They did record it, so I'm hoping that at some point we'll be able to put it up online and you'll be able to see it. But although it's my standard, it's the standard morality of capitalism talk. Not libertarians. They're called the Progressive Party, but a progressive in Norway is not far left. It's supposedly classical liberal. So yeah, I mean it was really good. It was a quick trip in and out of Oslo, very, very quickly. It was cold, rainy. And as you can tell probably from my voice, I think I'm coming down with something. So I've been coming down with something, or I've been, one of the reasons I haven't done shows. It's just difficult. All right, anyway, I am in Vienna. Those of you who are in Central Europe, maybe Bratislava or Vienna or any of the area around here, you should come tomorrow to my event at the Hayek Institute, the Austrian Economics Center here in Vienna. I'm doing an event. What am I doing an event? Tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I think, on left and right, why, in a sense, everybody is turning their backs to capitalism. Why they're both, all of them, turning their back to free markets. It should be a good event. Hopefully, you guys can make it. Some of you can make it if you're in that part of the world. All right, let's see. I know there's a Ayn Rand meetup here in Vienna, so I think some of them are coming. I don't know if they're listening live, but I think some of them are coming, and hopefully others will come as well. All right, I want to talk about what's been going on the right in the last few days. It's been pretty dramatic and I think very revealing of really the complete bankruptcy of many of the institutions and many of the people on the American right, of conservatism more broadly. I'll also say that, how do I put this nicely? I'll also say, I told you so. I hate being right sometimes when I'm right about negative things or right about something that is a negative outcome. But I've been telling you since since 2015, since I started this show, really, certainly since Donald Trump started running for president, and the alt-right kind of came out of their grovels or out of their tunnels or out of their whatever you want to call it, and started poking around. I've told you that they would win, in a sense that they would grow in power, because they face no principled opposition. The conservatives have nothing to stand by other than their religion and tradition. And, well, I mean, the tradition of many people in the history of the United States has been racism, anti-Semitism. So what tradition? What tradition are they going to follow? And religion, God, I mean, Christianity invented anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is primarily a product of Christianity. So when the alt-right came out in 2015, 2016, and was really all over the place on Twitter and everything, everybody says, oh, it's just a small number of people, it's not that big, it's not that important, it's not that crucial. It doesn't represent the mainstream, it doesn't represent conservatism, it doesn't represent conservative line. And they came out as anti-Semitic, they came out as racist, they came out as white nationalist. And by the way, let's be very clear, white nationalism is racism. I got some really amazing comments on the video, on my video on Nick Fuentes. I mean, really, some pretty stunning comments in terms of what people wrote, and yeah, you know, it's hard to it's hard for me to conceive of how bad people's thinking is on these issues, but the amount of really, really bad, I mean, just the comments. I mean, I did it in Nick Fuentes, and you know, my assumption is that if you listen to 10 minutes of Nick Fuentes, you get him. You figure it out, and you can see that he's a racist and he's an anti-Semite. And now it's true, he was on his very good behavior with Tucker, so he only said things like that he admires Stalin. Right? On his show, he says he admires Hitler, and he loves Hitler, and he loves Nazis. And on Tucker Carlson, he said Stalin. So he's picked the two, probably the most evil political leaders in human history, who killed more people than anybody in human history, just slaughtered them. Well, Mao Zedong is probably up there with them. And those are the people he admires. So, you know, when I thought, you know, that saying that Nick Fuentes was an anti-Semite and a racist, that would kind of be obvious, but it's stunning to me, kind of the pushback in the comments, right? Calling everyone an anti-Semite isn't going to do what you think it is. Yeah, I know, because it depends to who. People who are anti-Semites, I guess they don't get excited about that. But I'm looking for one particular comment I thought was really something else in terms of, you know, saying Nick Fuentes is not a racist. You know, white nationalism is not racist, right? And why is Nick Fuentes not a racist? All he says is he doesn't want his grandchildren to be of mixed race, and you know, some black people agreed with him. This is to justify Nick Fuentes, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what racism is, and the fact that blacks are racist too doesn't justify, you know, white racists. But it's you know, here's one. Yaron isn't even trying to hide that he's a leftist extremist anymore. Leftist extremist. You know, it's you know, if I criticize Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson, I'm a leftist extremist. I mean, it really is stunning the number of comments I got under the Nick Fuentes video that I put out, and the horrible and disgusting it really is. Hi. Anyway, I'm not going to find it now. That's fine. We don't need it. So, as you know, Nick Fuentes, because I talked about it on a previous show, Nick Fuentes went on Tucker Carlson, and they had a very respectful and lengthy 2 hours discussion. You know, I've criticized Tucker Carlson for years now, and particularly over the last couple of years. I think he's a complete hack. I think he's become a raving anti-Semite. He's pro-Putin. He believes in I don't know, demons that inflict physical damage on him. The guy's a complete mystical, anti-American hack. That's what he has become. So he interviews Fuentes, who just, and he's already interviewed people who think Hitler wasn't that bad, and who think Churchill was worse than Hitler, was really the bad guy. And, he's interviewed a variety of different people who've expressed just abhorrent points of view, which he has just rolled with. He's just nodded, and he's just asking questions, and he's just rolled with it. He's also interviewed people like Ted Cruz, who I don't particularly like, but is really good on these issues, and really pushed back on them for the defense of Israel, for example, and things like that. And it's really stunning to see Tucker Carlson when he's combative, i.e., when he really challenges people in an interview, and does a good job as an interviewer by challenging them, sometimes stupidly, like when he asked Ted Cruz how many people lived in Iran, to show that he was ignorant of Iran and shouldn't really talk about Iran. And then he does interviews with people who just say the most awful, disgusting things. And somebody wrote in the chat, and I think it's true, that he's a 9/11 truther now. He's a 9/11 conspiracy theory guy as well now, him and Dave Harriman. And when he talks to somebody who thinks somewhat favorably about the Nazis, or somebody like Fuentes, who's a rabid anti-Semite, racist, and white nationalist, and just gives him softball question after softball question after softball question, you have to come to the conclusion that he's somewhat sympathetic, or at least views it as really, really important to let these people express their point of view and get it out there on his platform, which is one of the biggest platforms in the world, right? Anyway, I criticized that. A lot of people online criticized it. Some old-line conservatives criticized it. And then Kevin Roberts, who is the CEO of the Heritage Foundation, came out with a video basically defending Tucker. He introduces the video by saying, there's been speculation that Heritage is distancing itself from Tucker Carlson over the past 24 hours. This is post-interview. I want to put that to rest right now. Here are my thoughts. And he has this 2.5-minute video. And it really is horrific. Basically says that Heritage will stand by Tucker Carlson no matter what. That Tucker Carlson is a friend of the Heritage Foundation, and whatever he does, Heritage Foundation will stand with him. Ultimately, there is a bigger enemy out there, and that is, I wonder if you know, do you know what the bigger enemy out there is? The left. And that is what it's important, and given that Tucker is against the left, they will stand with him. And he goes into a whole thing about how the Heritage Foundation is very against anti-Semitism, and fights against anti-Semitism, and on and on and on. And he even says that he views Nick Fuentes' views as abhorrent, but he thinks they need to be aired. They need to be platformed. They need to be spoken of. And he talks about this, what do you say? He calls it this venomous coalition that is going out, that is attacking Fuentes and Tucker Carlson. I mean, who are these people exactly? Maybe Jews? It's just a horrific statement. And he starts out the whole thing by saying, look, we support Israel and so on, but we should be willing to attack and critique Israel without being anti-Semitic. He declares that Christians can critique the state of Israel without being anti-Semitic. Yeah, nobody says you can't. I mean, Tucker Carlson, in this case, was not under fire for criticizing Israel. He was under fire for platforming an anti-Semite, a Holocaust denier, somebody who supports and thinks Hitler is cool, and believes in white Christian nationalism. White Christian nationalism. The question isn't whether one can criticize Israel or not, although Kevin Roberts make a big deal out of it. The question is it okay to platform and therefore give access to your audience of a known, let's call him what he is, a Nazi? It wasn't a debate about Israel. And indeed, Nick Fuentes' criticism of Jews goes far beyond their support or his perceiving their support of Israel. He hates Jews. And he is John, aren't you tired of asking the same question over and over and over again? I mean, I appreciate the super chat. $5 is $5, and I'll answer it. But this is like, I mean, clearly this is the third or fourth time you've asked this question. Is it your attempt to get me to say the same thing over and over again and thus discredit me in front of some audience that you imagine exists out there, that if they just hear my opinion on this issue, they will walk away from me? Is that what you're trying to do? Pretty pathetic, if you ask me. So anyway, the issue is not Israel. It's not Israel for Nick Fuentes. It's not Israel for Tucker Carlson. Yet Kevin Roberts wants to make it all about Israel. Roberts defends in this video Carlson against, quote, the slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. Oops. I apologize for that. The I don't know, hotel Wi-Fi. We didn't pray enough for the hotel Wi-Fi gods to help us here. So I'm not sure where it ended, but let me make a wider point. I mean, the reality is that, and by the way, I have captured all your super chats, so we can and will cover all the super chats. Let me just make sure that I. Right, so we will capture all the. We have captured all the super chats, so everything should be fine. All right, so I apologize for the drop, but you know it's the hotel. Whatever the hotel did, this is what it is. It ended when the Heritage Foundation sponsored Tucker. The Heritage Foundation sponsors Tucker, as I said, for in spite of the fact that Tucker platforms Fuentes, but more than that, in spite of the fact that Tucker is supportive of Putin, gives us Qatari talking points, is anti-American in so many ways, has abandoned any respect for freedom, free markets, anything like that. Tucker Carlson has become a joke, a crazy, nutty joke. He's expressed explicit anti-Semitic views himself, in addition to what. To platforming Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson has become an embarrassment. And yet, Heritage Foundation sponsors his show through advertising. It, of course, has now declared explicitly that he is one of them, that he is their friend, that he will always be part of the coalition as they fight the left. But here's the thing that's really, really important and important to note. The right does not have the tools to stand up, just like the left does not have the tools to stand up to their extreme manifestations, if you will. They do not have the tools to stand up to the racist and the anti-Semites. They do not have the tools to stand up to the white nationalists or the white or the national, the Christian conservatives. Indeed, one of the sad things that's going to come out of the national conservative movement is that the national conservative movement was to a large extent founded by an Israeli, a Jew, a conservative Jew, a yarmulke-wearing conservative Jew by the name of Yoram Chazoni, who I've debated, and that the national conservative movement is going to be a breeding ground for ultimately Christian conservatives and ultimately anti-Semite conservatives. That is, the national conservative movement founded by an Israeli Jew is going to be a place where where ultimately the worst enemies of Israel and the worst enemies of Jews are going to be prevalent. Now, of the right, not the left, obviously, but still. I mean, if the world takes seriously the national conservative agenda, you will get these nationalists and nationalist governments that ultimately will turn against the Jews because the Jews don't belong in those nations, according to them. They have no tool to stand up against them. Once Yoram Chazoni has accepted collectivism, has accepted tribalism, well, he doesn't get to choose which collective wins, which tribe wins, and what the attitude of that tribe is towards his own tribe, the Jewish tribe. Tribalism, once tribalism accepted, you've accepted irrationality. Once tribalism has been accepted, you've accepted the negation of freedom. And the conservatives, Heritage Foundation, certainly because of the Heritage Foundation, has joined the tribe around MAGA and around Trump. It has nothing original, nothing interesting, nothing of value to really say. So, what is the defense of regular conservatives, of the current conservative movement against Nick Fuentes? And just to be clear, I've now watched a bunch of Nick Fuentes videos. I find it really weird that any of you find him entertaining or worthwhile or willing to watch any of his stuff. He is a slimy monster. He has the kind of views that made Hitler Hitler. He's a Nazi. And yet people tolerate him, people pursue him. Now, it's true, some people are pushing back against Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson, but they have no leg to stand on. What is the argument against? Oh, they'll call him an anti-Semite, but they can't defend individualism. They can't talk about what this country is really about, what this country actually stands for. I mean, here we have somebody here. 9 million people of Israel are the most important thing to America, and Americanism in Yaron's mind. When have I ever said anything that resembles that? I've done whole shows on what America is and Americanism without mentioning Israel once. Israel's not important when it comes to discussing the future of America. What's important is America, its founding principles, the founding fathers. What's important is the Declaration of Independence, the idea of all men are created equal, endowed with inalienable rights. Only reason I talk a lot about Israel is because it's in the news. I mean, Trump talks about Israel all the time. Is that because Israel matters to him more than anything else? I don't need This guy's lying. All right. So there's no basis for them to defend against these white nationalists, these fascists. They have no basis to do it because they don't understand the foundation on which this country is built. They cannot talk about individual rights. They cannot talk about individualism. They certainly do not talk about capitalism. I mean, there was an interesting exchange by the other day by J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance was filling in for Charlie Cook at a Turning Point USA. He gets asked a Turning Point USA event. He gets asked a question. Here's the question. I'm a Christian man. Notice how this is always the case. This is the case with Wabif, who was making comments on the chat. They argue that it's all about Israel, but really what drives it is hatred of Jews. It's anti-Semitism. So here's what this young person says. I'm a Christian man, and I'm just confused why there's the notion that we might owe Israel something, or that they're our greatest ally, or that we have to support this multi-$100 billion foreign aid package to Israel. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm just confused why this idea has come around, considering the fact that not only does their religion not agree with ours, but also openly supports the prosecution of ours. It openly supports the prosecution of Christians. Where is that? Where is this openly supporting that? Is there any evidence of that? I mean, clearly anti-Semitic, clearly driven by hatred of the Jews and a claim about their religion. Does Tucker Carlson J.D. Vance confront that? No. He goes into a whole spiel about we're not beholden to Israel and America first doesn't mean we don't have alliances, and Israel sometimes is an ally and sometimes is not, and that Trump really twisted Netanyahu's arm in order to get this peace deal. So Israel does what we tell it to do. And then he argued that there are theological differences between Christian and Jews, but they don't preclude collaboration here and there on matters of common concern. Nothing about Jews persecuting Christians, which is just a fantasy. And, he doesn't want to piss off people. I mean, he doesn't want to piss off Nick Fuentes' supporters. That's what's driving him. The need to keep them part of the coalition so that he can get the nomination next time and they support him. I mean, J.D. Vance can't talk against them. I mean, he can't even defend his wife. Indeed, I think in the same Q&A, or maybe it was in another place, I'm not sure, he says that he's hoping that his wife, who is Hindu, I think she's Hindu, converts to Christianity. Because Nick Fuentes, on a regular basis on his show, goes after J.D. Vance and says that J.D. Vance is married to a brown woman, and that's not acceptable. And he can never be allowed to be president of the United States because his wife is not white. And she's not a Christian. So J.D. Vance, again, wants to appease. Who does he want to appease? He wants to appease the worst element, the Nick Fuentes and his groypers, by telling them, oh, no, she's going to become a Christian, don't worry. She's going to convert. I mean, basically, MAGA relies now on groypers. And more, the Conservative Party, more and more, the Republican Party is going to rely on Nick Fuentes and is going to be accommodating of Nick Fuentes' views. Remember, the German conservatives really pushed back against Hitler for a while. And they accepted Hitler. They thought he was a joke. They thought he was repulsive. They thought he was awful. They really opposed him. But it was a marriage of convenience. And they supported him out of convenience. You remember why? Because they had a common enemy. Oh, what was the common enemy of conservatives and Hitler? What was the common enemy? Oh, yes, the left. And of course, once they let him in, he had the energy behind him. He had young people behind him. He had millions of followers behind him. He had people who'd march in the streets for him. And soon enough, he controlled it. So, I mean, I think the real fear here is basically the complete takeover of the Republican Party by the Nick Fuenteses of the world. That the conservatives and the Republican Party are going to become a party of Christian conservatives, white Christian conservatives, racists, and anti-Semites. And wrapped around religion and wrapped around a flag. Of course, Nick Fuentes makes his case constantly about it's all about America first. Right? He attacks Jews for having dual alliances because he claims that Jews all have dual citizenship. Very few Jews have actual dual citizenship. And lots of people have dual citizenships. Brits have dual citizenship. Europeans have many more dual citizenship than Jews do, than Israelis. And yet, it's only the Israelis, the Jews' dual citizenship that is a problem. So I don't know. I don't know what comes of this country. I don't know what comes of the Republican Party. We have now the Democratic Party running an anti-Semitic, Islamist, socialist mayor for New York, and we have the Republican Party probably running a anti-Semitic Christian nationalist for president next time in J.D. Vance. And we have the Heritage Foundation, the bastion of old line conservatism, basically, or not basically, just endorsing Tucker Carlson, who then platforms and in his silence and his lack of opposition endorses the worst kind of Nazi supporter in Nick Fuentes. By the way, this one's kind of funny, but Nick Fuentes has recently come out in favor of Gavin Newsom. He said if there was just to give you a sense of this, if there was a election between Gavin Newsom and J.D. Vance, he and the Groypers would support Gavin Newsom because Gavin Newsom is white, his wife is white, his kids are white, and J.D. Vance has a brown wife and brown kids, and that's not acceptable. That can't be in the White House. So they're willing to support a leftist, just in name of their racism. I think Richard Hanania is right. He says the total groipification of the GOP is nearing its completion. You saw the emails, the text messages of the young Republicans spouting Nick Fuentes-like views when talking among themselves. Why is this happening? I mean, again, because I think old line Republican ideas kind of went bankrupt with Bush. They went nowhere. They were unprincipled. They were completely pragmatic. Trump opened up this opportunity for the Groypers, for racists, by declaring so-called America first, and then kind of winking and the good people on both sides kind of attitude towards the worst elements among his supporters, and being embraced by MAGA, which turned into a conspiracy theory, crazy, nutty, I won't call it an ideology because it's not really an ideology. Trump has legitimized the alt-right. He's legitimized the racist right. He's legitimized all of them. If somebody like Trump with his character can be supported by conservatives, think about that. I mean, conservatives are supporting a philandering, just a horrible, lying human being. Somebody who's, by conservative standards, been divorced, 3 times, had many affairs, talked about grabbing women by the, and all of that. And conservatives are just, yeah, okay, Christian conservatives are just like, yeah, fine, we're electing this guy. They've opened up the door to anybody. They've opened up the door to, Trump, by the conservatives now are willing to tolerate anything as long as they beat the left. They supported Trump because he could beat the left. And Nick Fuentes is anti-left. At least they think he is. I'm not sure about this Gavin Newsom stuff. But Trump has opened up the door. The supporters of Trump had opened up the door. His wink, wink, everything is okay, don't worry about the racism, has opened up the door. Charlottesville opened up the door to the worst elements on the right dominating the Republican Party. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the slow domination of the Republican Party. They control it. Their hatred of immigrants is now manifest on the streets with ICE. Their hatred of Jews is manifest every week on Tucker Carlson's show. Remember, Charlottesville, what was the as they marched, it was Jews. Jews will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. And yes, Trump did say something something about the neo-Nazis, the horrible neo-Nazis out there. But he also said they're good people on both sides. Which, if you're still confused about it, I did a whole show on it. So find my show on Charlottesville and watch it, where I analyze line by line the entire speech by Trump, including his condemnation and including his the nice people. This is what has led, open up the door to these types. And again, there's no defense. There's nothing conservatives can say to defend themselves against this. On the right, they've always been a little racist. Now they're full-on racists. On the right, they've never really completely trusted the Jews. Now they're full-on anti-Semitic. On the right, they've never embraced capitalism. Now they're full-on statists. On the right, they've always endorsed a little bit of Christianity in politics. Now they're full-on Christian nationalists. As Ayn Rand said, when you compromise with evil, only evil gains, only evil wins. And creating a coalition in bringing racist anti-Semites into the tent, only they can win. Only they can win. And they're winning. They are winning. There's no question about that. There's the voices I see standing up against, against this, old line conservatives that are losing the big battle. Tucker Carlson has many, many more followers than them. Indeed, Nick Fuentes probably has more followers than, I don't know, Mike Levin or David Hassani or some of these others. David Hassani writes, Vance's answers yesterday were despicable. I'm not sure why Jews are praising him. He let a questionnaires vile smear against American Jews go completely unchallenged, only assuring him that Trump didn't let Israel pull the U.S. into a world war, as if that's what it wanted. Imagine some dopey kid going off on how the Pope secretly pays off all U.S. politicians to create open border policies and illegal invasions, and then the vice president tells him not to worry, the president has dashed the Pope's plan. Vance is Tucker's boy, and everyone understands it, which is why so many of these people won't criticize Tucker. It's pretty bleak. I want to say one thing about this kid's accusation, and you see that in Fuentes and you see it in Tucker Carlson, that the U.S. gives Israel so much money. So let's look at the facts, right? Let's look at the actual facts. The U.S. provides Israel with about $3.8 billion in military aid each year. Zero economic aid. It used to be 30 years ago that the U.S. gave Israel economic aid. It gives it no economic aid. $3.8 billion in military aid. Around 3.3 of that 3.8 is in grants that the only way they can use them is to purchase U.S. Weapons. So all that money comes right back to American manufacturers of weapon systems. And another $500 million is in cooperation around missile defense programs, the various shields that Israel has, which of course the United States benefits enormously from as it is trying to develop its own missile defense program. It's sharing all the information that Israel has on its experiences with missile defense systems. Now, this is a significant amount. $3.8 billion is nothing to sneeze at. It's just under 5% of total U.S. aid budget, military plus economic, and it's 0.06% of the total federal budget. It's not hundreds of billions of dollars, which is what the kid claimed, and J.D. Vance never corrected. The U.S., just to give you a context, the U.S. gives the United Nations $14 to $16 billion a year. The United Nations, which is horrifically anti-American, gets 14 to 16 billion. Israel gets 3.8. Now, again, the 3.3 billion is all spent on purchasing American equipment. American equipment that then Israel uses, like F-35s. Israel not only uses F-35s, but it actually makes changes to the F-35s. It adjusts the F-35s to its own needs. And then it uses the F-35s. It puts them into combat. According to, I think it's Lockheed Martin that builds the F-35s, or Northrop, I can't remember which one. According to them, the benefit that they get from the fact that Israel uses this plane on a regular basis is worth tens of billions of dollars of research and development that they do not have to do because Israel is actually doing it in practice and giving them the data, the information. On top of that, Israel provides the United States with massive intelligence. Intelligence about terrorist organizations, about Islamist activities, about other countries in the Middle East that the United States has an interest in. Various U.S. officials have estimated that America, in order to replicate what Israel provides them in terms of intelligence, would have to spend between $15 to $20 billion a year. So the United States gets back much, 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 much more than it gives Israel. It's not even close. And yet, they keep hopping on this. This is the thing that bothers them, which a clear indication that something else is driving this. It's not Israel that really bugs them. Now, let me be very clear. I don't think the United States should give Israel anything. I think Israel would continue to share intelligence. And I think Israel could afford this, 3.8 billion, maybe the 500 million that is co-development of the missile defense system, that makes sense. But the 3.3 billion, the United States should stop giving Israel. Israel doesn't need it. It's a rich country. And it should get richer. It needs to get richer. Its own self-defense requires it to get richer. But Israel should stop giving, the U.S. should stop giving Israel the aid. Maybe, hopefully Israel continues to give the intelligence, but more importantly, it will stop being a leverage that the United States can use on Israel. It'll stop being leverage that anti-Semites can use against Israel. It'll, I think, give Israel a freer hand to determine its own affairs. And I don't believe that America should be handing out money to countries. There's absolutely no reason. I think the United States should stop supporting Egypt and Jordan and all the other countries in the Middle East that it sends dollars to, more than it sends to Israel. And it gets very little in return for that money. But it's a drop in a bucket, and America gets a big return on that investment. I think it would get a lot of that anyway, because Israel will continue to buy F-35s, continue to give the manufacturer the information they need. Israel, I think, will continue to provide the United States with the intelligence support. But let's just get rid of this issue by basically the United States stopping to support financially the Israelis. It's not necessary. I was going to get into giving you some quotes from Nick Fuentes, but really, it's unnecessary. And Fuentes talks about Jews being demons that are destroying this country. He advocates killing them all. At least the Jews that are demons. Maybe the Jews that are not demons don't need to be killed. It's not clear. He thinks Hitler is awesome, that Hitler was right, that the Holocaust never happened. I'm not sure what Hitler's right about if the Holocaust never happened, because Nick Fuentes agrees that a Holocaust should happen. He wants to kill them now. This is scum. If there ever was scum, this is scum. He says, quote, "When we take power, the Jews will be needed to be given the death penalty. I'm far more concerned about that than non-white people." So say he hates Jews more than he hates black people, in other words. The idea that you would give this person a stage, that you would introduce him to his audience, that you would not challenge everything that he says. The idea that Tucker Carlson is embraced by people like the Heritage Foundation is this despicable. One last thing I want to say. Again, in the way that Trump supports all this and is supportive of the whole kind of racist, white nationalist agenda, whether he himself is a racist or not, I do not know. But, we know that Miller is, even though Miller's Jewish, I guess, but he's supportive of all this. The United States declared at the end of last week that it was restricting the amount of asylum seekers to the United States to 7,500. Now, I'm supportive of that. I don't think the basis for coming to the United States should be seeking asylum. And I think the basis should be, can you get a job? But here's the thing. The one group that the Trump administration explicitly has said are welcome as asylum seekers, the one group that they're encouraging to come to the United States as asylum seekers, one group, white South Africans of Afrikaners descent. So we don't want brown people being persecuted by the Venezuelan government. We don't want brown people being persecuted by the communist regime in Cuba. We don't want white people escaping gangs in Guatemala or other places in Latin America. And we don't want black people escaping violence in most of the countries of Africa. We want white people in Africa who supposedly being persecuted in South Africa. Whether they are or they're not, it's not the point. It's we only want white people. That is the one group that we're happy to grant asylum to. And so most of the 7,500 that have now been approved for asylum, most of them are going to be South Africans, Afrikaners. Now, it's not clear they're going to be that many Afrikaners want to leave South Africa, but that's the one group that he's opened up. If that's not just again, appeasing the white nationalists, appeasing the racists, appeasing the worst elements within the Republican Party, I don't know what is. By the way, just to give you a sense, last year, the number of asylum seekers that were approved, or the ceiling, was 125,000. So they've gone from 125,000 to 7,500. That's a pretty big drop, which is fine by me if they open up immigration from other sources, which they won't. But it's the racist aspect of it, and it's clearly racist. There's no other justification for singling out white South Africans. Well, somebody says, I'm surprised not Qataris. Well, Qataris are not running away from anything, right? The regime is super nice and super friendly, and that's what they want. So I support limiting refugees, but I also support expanding work-related visas, which the Trump administration will not do, and I don't support limiting the refugees to white dudes. I know there's open talk of racial hatred among certain people in the South African government. Believe me, I know. I mean, I have quite a few family members in South Africa, and they have the same skin color as I do. So I know exactly what's going on in South Africa, and I care about what's going on in South Africa, and I worry about what's going on in South Africa. And by the way, the South Africans get a lot of money from Qatar, and that is why they're so anti-Israel, and why they're the ones who brought prosecution on the ICC against Israel for it's the Qatari money's influence beyond the fact that they're leftists and haters of Israel, above and beyond that. Oh, old Greg says I'm not very well informed. Please tell me what I'm not well informed. What I'm not well informed about. All right. Old Greg says, we should not be a nation that hosts our ideological enemies. I agree. Nick Fuentes should be deported immediately. So should Tucker Carlson. He's our ideological enemy. So let's get rid of him. I mean, I'm kidding, but because I don't think that's what Greg meant. He's also accusing me of misquoting Fuentes. I paraphrased, but I've watched the Nick Fuentes videos, and no, it's very accurate. Nick Fuentes is anti-American. He is thoroughly, systematically, through and through, anti-American. He is as anti-American as Mamdani is. They are twin brothers in a sense, in their anti-Americanism. He is as anti-American as the worst leftists are. And he is the kind of person that the founding fathers and really the people who built this country would find abhorrent and despicable. And he is, again, he's anti-American. He's not America first. He's America last. And as most of the people who declare themselves America first, they don't understand what America is. They have no conception of Americanism. They have no conception of what America stands for. America is the land of individualism. Nick Fuentes is a through and through collectivist, tribalist. And if you don't see that, then you don't have you can't think. You've become part of the tribe, and therefore can't think. God, you guys are some of you are just, it's hard to believe, this is the thing. Maybe I get a biased kind of in terms of people who follow me, but maybe it's because the title had Fuentes in it. But the people in my chat are so horrific some of them, to the extent that they are representative of what's going on in America. It is really horrifying. Now, again, it's probably not representative of what's going on in most of America. But it is truly horrific. Thomas Jefferson is rolling in his grave, thinking about if he has any access to what is going on right now. So yes, Fuentes is anti-American. Tucker Carlson's anti-American. They have no conception of what America means, what America is, and the idea that the founders would have supported a anti-Semite. You should read George Washington's letter to the Jewish community of Charleston, I think it was. You should look at what Thomas Jefferson had to say about separation of state from religion. You should read what they had to say about individual rights. This country was purposely not founded as a Christian country. This is a country founded on secular values. This is a country founded by deists and in some cases atheists, men of principle, not scumbags like Nick Fuentes. All right, let's all right, let's turn to your questions. We have quite a few. Thank you guys. You guys are being very generous today. And there are a lot of questions, so we will cover them all as long as the Wi-Fi gods play along. All right, let's start with, I thought I saw a $100 question. Yeah, there's a $100 question. Got a bunch of $50 questions. Thank you guys. All right, let's start with, where is it? Michael, who has a $100 question. All right. America was not founded on Christian values. It was founded in Enlightenment values. It was founded on values that relegated Christianity, relegated religion to your personal realm and keep it out of the public square and keep it out of government. Again, read Thomas Jefferson. Read the statute on religious liberty in the Virginia Constitution. You guys who claim to be America first should learn a little bit about America and not from Christian nationalist sources that pervert and distort the founders and make them into what they would like them to be. But read the originals. Read the Federalist Papers. Read Thomas Jefferson. Look at what he read and what he studied. Look at even John Adams. Look at who they respected. Look at what they believed in. Look at what they stood for. And they... All right, Michael, thank you for the $100. 40% of Trump's time is spent scheming for government manipulation and control to help his family business. 40% is spent fixing problems he created. The remaining 20% is mostly spent running around trying to garner praise and attention from others to fill his empty ego. I don't think he has to actually spend 40% of his time to manipulate things for his family business. I think that only takes a small amount of his time. It's generated over $3 billion of profits for his family, so he is by far the most corrupt president in American history. He is, I don't think he has to spend 40% of the time. It's true that he spends a huge amount of time fixing problems he's creating and creating more problems by fixing them. So he's not really fixing them, he's just creating a whole sequence of problems on top of problems on top of problems. We just got a trade deal with China. As I told you beforehand, that it wasn't a deal. It's not a deal. It's just an outline of a deal, and it's a truce. It's a ceasefire for a year. It doesn't give the United States anything that it didn't already have. The United States benefits zero from this deal. The United States was much better off vis-a-vis its relationship with China before Trump started this whole trade war. The United States is clearly losing the trade war. Every time Trump meets with Xi, he gives Xi more stuff. So yes, he spends a lot of it, and all of it, including that, is there to garner attention and praise. He spends much of his time claiming to have established the only peace in the Middle East in 3,000 years, and then preventing Israel from actually destroying its enemies and holding them back. It really is. He really is pathetic. He really is pathetic. But yes, Michael, thank you for the support. Really, really, really appreciate it, on top of everything else that you do. Right, I see that, let's see, we have a robust debate going on in my chat about Jay Dyer is a complete rationalist detached from reality. The idea that he won the debate is absurd when he completely distorts and perverts the concepts that he uses and refuses to accept any epistemology but his distorted epistemology. So a debate with him is impossible because he wants to set all the terms. But anyway, I'm going to ignore the chat. Ian Meerkat, was fun seeing you in Krakow. Yes, met some awesome people at the bar PS Gaza de la Nada. Yeah, we're still working on that. It was good to see you, Ian Meerkat. Thank you for being there. Thank you for all your support. We had a great event in Krakow, about 35 students at the university there. It was also Morality of Capitalism. In between, I spoke at the Free Cities conference in Prague. Had about 100 people in the audience, maybe more, maybe 150. And I talked about, what did I talk about there? Why freedom? Why you should care about freedom? And what's the purpose of freedom? Freedom is not an end in itself. Freedom is a means to an end. And what is that end? Talked about self-interest and talked about happiness, and it was good. It pissed off a bunch of people. Dave, good to see you, Dave. Thank you for the support. Dave says, I voted for Cuomo today. In my area, there are many Mamdani campaigners. I chatted with some, and they're not nihilistic like Antifa or ideological Marxist. They're idealists. Most are high-income earners. Yes, that's what I suspect. With advanced degrees, that's what I suspected. They're delusional about how to achieve human flourishing, but they're the type of crowd more likely to be responsive to objectivism than the fascist brutes on the right. I agree. I think that's right. They're typically software engineers or professionals. They make a lot of money. A lot of them live in Brooklyn. I don't know where you talk to them, but Mamdani has a lot of support in the wealthy areas of Brooklyn where these professionals live. And they are delusional. They've been miseducated, dramatically miseducated since they were in kindergarten. They don't understand capitalism and its benefits. They have this, naive but also evasive view because they purposefully don't look at it too carefully of socialism, and they don't like Israel because they buy all the images of bombing babies, and they have this vague notion that Israel has done something horrible to the Palestinians, and Israel is strong after all. Something must be wrong. They must have done something bad to be strong. They bought into some extent or another. They bought into the intersectionality argument. They're altruists because that's all they've known. All they've known throughout their life is altruism. So yeah, I agree with you. They're not nihilists per se. The consequence of what they're doing is nihilism. And they are evasive. they do evade in order to be able to vote for money. They have to evade a huge amount. Not your average algorithm. Many on the left, however, wrong philosophically, still operate within the framework of the Constitution. They act through laws and institutions rather than by personal decree, which makes them substantially less dangerous than the new right. Yeah, I agree completely. It's one of my arguments about voting for Trump, particularly the second time, when it was clear that he was going to be guided by the new right, that he was going to surround himself by the new right, and that he was dedicated to himself to breaking the system, a system that he hates and despises. He has no respect for the Constitution, and he wants to break it. And yes, at least the left will do a lot of damage, but the left does damage within parameters that are easily reversible because they do it within the parameters of the law and the Constitution. They're not quite ready to declare the Constitution irrelevant as Trump is. That makes them, I think, less dangerous. Even if, in the short run, very, very damaging. Not your average algorithm. If we fail to distinguish between people who follow the rule of law and people who seek to rule by whim, you've already surrendered the ground of principle. I agree. I don't believe you can defend Trump and still label yourself an objectivist at this point. It depends how you're defending Trump. Again, I have some tolerance, I have some understanding of people in business who voted for Trump and might defend certain things about Trump. And I have some understanding of that, particularly before the election. I think since the election, Trump is manifest the worst, the worst possibilities, is as bad as the worst of what I expected. But look, the whole idea of calling yourself an objectivist and who calls himself an objectivist or doesn't call himself is not of interest to me. What really matters to me is the truth. What matters to me is, are you a truth seeker? The question is, are people really, even the people who supported Trump, able to look at him with any objectivity? Are they willing to see the evil that's there, even as they see the elements of good that they think is there? I don't think there's any good in Trump, but the elements of good. Can they really, criticize him? So, for example, people who won't criticize Trump, that I think is horrific and despicable. But I'm not ready to say everybody who voted for him, or everybody who supports him in some way, cannot be an objectivist. But again, what is an objectivist, co-objectivist? I don't think, who you vote for. I don't think it's that valuable to categorize people that way. But are you a truth seeker? And therefore, are you willing to not evade and look clearly and objectively and rationally at what Trump actually stands for and what Trump actually does? Andrew, many anti-Semites suffer from a motivation by hate. Is that motivation by fear at the core? Do you blame modern philosophy for the creation of their hatred? Still, despite modern philosophical influences, don't they have a choice to be evil? Yes, everybody out there is influenced by modern philosophy, and some either reject the philosophy or they let it bounce off of them, or it affects them at certain marginal issues, but they don't become haters. They don't let it consume them. Do I blame modern philosophy? Yes. It's if you want to understand the impact philosophy has on people's lives, in our politics, read Dominus Parallels. Dominus Parallels, where Dr. Peikoff really explains the rise of Hitler from the perspective of the ideas that were prevalent in Germany at the time and in the decades leading to his rise. And if you look at America today, and that's the dominant parallel, the parallel is America, you see the same ideas prevalent in our culture. So it is Kantian philosophy and its postmodern implementation and its combination with religion that is leading to this modern form of anti-Semitism, because that all leads towards collectivism, that all leads towards tribalism. And look, anti-Semitism is every collectivistic culture out there is going to be anti-Semitic, because collectivism is all about my group versus all the other groups. And however you define my group in any kind of nation, the Jews are going to be the other. The Jews are the other in Germany, the Jews are the other in America. And they're particularly an offensive other because they are religiously different, they're somewhat culturally different, and now there's this country called Israel that supposedly they're aligned with, they're affiliated with, that you can blame them for everything that it does. So it is collectivism and tribalism that are on the rise, and the consequence of that is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is not the primary, it is the consequences. By the way, the more Christian you become, the more anti-Semitic you'll become. The reality is that Christianity is the origin of anti-Semitism. It is the beginning of anti-Semitism. It starts with Paul. And it starts with the church fathers. It starts with the debates of the church fathers, about the horrible Jews that do not accept Christ and what should be done with them. And some of the church fathers, some of the first original great theologians of Christianity, basically said Jews need to be killed because they won't accept Christ. I mean, it was Augustine, who was the moderate, who said they shouldn't be killed. They should be kept alive to suffer, so that everybody can constantly see what happens to those who do not accept Christ. The Crusades were first and foremost about killing Jews. And then we'll go to Jerusalem and kill Muslims. But Christianity is the source of anti-Semitism. And it's the breeding ground of anti-Semitism. And therefore, what you get is, as the country becomes more tribal, more collectivistic, and therefore, and more Christian, it'll become more anti-Semitic. That's on the right. And on the left, the anti-Semitism comes from collectivism and altruism. So, it's intersectionality. It's the fact that Jews are successful. It's the fact that the same thing happened in Germany. The Jews are successful. But they're the other, and they're scheming against us, and they're bad, and therefore they must be eliminated. And I think the same attitude exists today. Of course, the Jews killed Jesus. And notice that they don't blame the Romans for killing Jesus. They don't blame the Roman Empire for killing Jesus. And that's purposefully done. Originally, the Romans were blamed for killing Jesus. They were the primary cause of Jesus' death. But then, when the Roman Empire became Christian, that is when Constantine brought Christianity into the Roman Empire, made Christianity a part of Roman identity, then it didn't make sense for them to continue blaming themselves for killing Jesus. So they shifted. Pontius Pius, the Roman, was just a tool of the Jews. He was just being manipulated by the Jews. And, the Jewish clergy, the Jewish leadership, the Jewish establishment. And they're the ones who actually killed Jesus. And of course, he was betrayed by a Jew. But then all of his followers were Jews, right? He was a Jew. But he was a Jew who led a new sect, who led a cult. And so that, again, Christianity is very much the source of anti-Semitism. Jews might have been hated before that, but certainly all forms of anti-Semitism post-Jesus are influenced by Christian anti-Semitism. So it's a combination of modern philosophy, Kant and post-Kantian philosophy, and Christianity. And on the left, it's mostly secular post-Kantian philosophy and Marxism. Marx was an anti-Semite. I mean, Marx sounds like Nick Fuentes. When Nick Fuentes complains about capitalist Jews and Jewish greed, it sounds exactly like Marx, Karl Marx. It's as if he's reading from Karl Marx's essay on the Jewish question. Troy, thank you. Troy just came in with 500 Australian dollars. Really, really, really appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Troy. That is amazing. Yeah, all right. All right. Harper Campbell. It's sad to see the author of the ominous parallels being exploited in his old age and poor health by Trump psychopaths like Dave Harriman. Oh, I like that you call Dave Harriman a psychopath. I think that's fitting. As a justification for their bootlicking support of an authoritarian. Yeah, I think it's really, really sad to see Dave Harriman associating with Leonard Peikoff. He should have been, Leonard should have nothing to do with Dave, and I think a younger Leonard would have nothing to do with Dave Harriman. It's really sad. Brian, you said last show that we should teach the fountainhead to our kids. Doesn't that mean you have to marry an objectivist? What if your spouse wants to teach your kids some collectivist big book or religious book? Then let them. That is, then present the kids with both sets of ideas and let the kids make a choice. But to ignore the ideas that you hold, or to ignore the ideas that your wife holds or your husband holds, I think is wrong. So present them with both views, present them with both ideas, and let the kids make a decision instead of creating a vacuum. So no, you don't have to marry an objectivist for that. If your spouse wants to present their views, let them. And again, all right. Shazbot has a correction, and we're not burying the correction, right? Shazbot says, important correction. On the last show, I quoted Lieutenant Frank Drebin, the Naked Gun, as receiving an award for killing 100 drug dealers. It was actually 1,000 drug dealers. Oh, so Trump has a way to go before he gets to 1,000 drug dealers on those boats, because he's only killing them one or two at a time, or two or three at a time. So it's going to be a while. A lot of boats are going to have to be blown out of the water for that to happen. We'll talk more about that on another show. All right. Thank you, Shazbot. Not your average algorithm. Trump doesn't even pretend to operate within a constitutional framework. He treats the law as a tool of loyalty and vengeance, not as a principle that binds every individual equally. Yes, I think that's true. But more than that, he treats the law as an obstacle to achieving his goals. He treats the law as an obstacle to be overcome, given the goals that he has. He doesn't treat the law as principles to guide social action, principles to guide the limitation on government. On the contrary, he finds the Constitution and the laws are too limiting of him. We'll see in the arguments in front of the Supreme Court around tariffs how that plays out. Trump doesn't want to be limited by all these laws and a Constitution and a Supreme Court. He finds that offensive. Michael, as much as Trump advises one fascist control over the economy, does Trump prefer a strong stock market he can take credit for? Because you can't have both. The one thing preventing our economic enslavement is Trump's narcissism. I think he wants both. And look, he's got all these tariffs, and the stock market's doing fantastic. Now, whether it will continue to do fantastic, how long the stock market could stay as high as it is, I don't know. But yes, Trump wants a good stock market. He wants a good bond market. He wants low interest rates, and he wants control over the economy. And he can't have everything at the same time. and there's pulls and tugs, but a lot of it's out of his control. He doesn't actually control the stock market. So if there's a significant correction in the marketplace, in the stock market, what's Trump going to do? I mean, I don't think he'll have much control over it. I don't think there's much he can do one way or the other, even if he wants a successful stock market. Very few presidents do. Somebody says, all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. There's no legitimate criticism of Israel. That's not true. I criticize Israel all the time. There's absolutely legitimate criticism of Israel. There's a lot of things Israel does badly, wrongly. Paul, how do sanctions against a country actually work? How can the executive branch issue sanctions? Can other countries sanction U.S. sales? Yes, sanctions work by, for example, we freeze the bank accounts of Russian oligarchs. So they can't withdraw the money from their bank accounts. The bank cannot release the money to them, cannot release the money to anybody. It's just frozen in place. And, other countries can do that to Americans who have money in their banks. America took the yachts of sanctioned Russian oligarchs. So the things like that. Now, it's part of, my understanding is, and I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that there are laws that give the executive branch the authority to extend sanctions on other countries. For example, you're not allowed to buy wheat from, you're not allowed to buy some product from country X. For example, you can't buy Cuban cigars. I think that's stupid, but you can't buy Cuban cigars, right? That's illegal. That's a form of sanction. So it's just a banning of a particular product from a particular place. And I think there are laws that have given the executive the power to do that as part of their responsibility for foreign policy. The Oceanist. Collectivism is easy. It's easier to blame an other for your personal shortcomings. Absolutely. A lot of these people, whether left or right, are insecure and will blame the immigrant or the billionaire for their faults. Yes. That's absolutely the case, but I don't think that's the source of collectivism. I don't think that's where collectivism actually comes from. Collectivism doesn't come from blaming the other. Collectivism comes from a lack of self-esteem, a lack of confidence in one's own judgment, and again, the philosophy, the ideology that one's own judgment doesn't count, that one's own life doesn't count. It comes from altruism that tells you that you should sacrifice for others, and therefore others are more important than you. That's collectivism, right? Collectivism is that others are above you, that the group, whatever group, some group, is more important than you as an individual. The source of that is lack of self-esteem. The source of that is a distrust of your own capacity to think and reason. And the source of that is a morality that tells you and that you buy into that says that your happiness, your success, your flourishing is not important. What's important is other people. And you're just a sacrificial lamb for their sake. Well, which other people? Well, you have to choose a group to sacrifice to. And that becomes your collective, that becomes your standard, that becomes your guide. It's driven by altruism and anti-reason. That's what drives collectivism. And then once you form a collective and you're still unhappy and you're still miserable and you're still all of that, then you turn against the successful other and you blame them for your failings, just as you described. But that's kind of a consequences, not the motivation. Andrew says, what is the significance of wanting to belong to the majority group as a motive among Christian collectivists? If J.D. stayed an atheist, he could not have become a prominent statesman and adored by so many as he is now. I don't know. I mean, I think this is truly an intellectual transition for J.D. Vance. I don't think this was motivated by his desire for power. I think when he became a Christian, he was not yet contemplating politics. And we know the influence that made him Christian, and that influence was somebody he respected. It was Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, who is a Catholic, but a kind of a quirky Catholic, and introduced him to this theologian that taught at Stanford, and I forget his name, but that influenced Peter Thiel, and he influenced J.D. Vance, and then J.D. Vance ultimately converted to Catholicism. But I don't think that whole process and that transition were motivated by a lust for power. I think it was motivated by maybe a need to belong to a group. But again, it wasn't a need to belong to a group because he wanted power. It was a need to belong to a group because psychologically he wanted to belong to a group. It also is true that unless you have self-esteem and unless you have a strong sense of values, that, for some people, atheism is empty. Atheism is empty. Atheism is just a negation of God. It's not pro anything. And I think J.D. Vance was looking for something. And part of it is social, and part of it is intellectual. But I don't think the primary was political. I don't think the primary was political. Yep. All right, Roland. Support for my fellow leftist extremist. That's me, a leftist extremist. Rajesh says, thank you. I thank you, Rajesh. Thank you for the support. John, okay, this is the question he asks every few weeks. Long term, what's the greater threat to Europe, Christianity or Islam? Christianity. Islam is the short-term threat. Islam is what will allow Christianity to rise and become a real threat. It is the response to Islam that the Christian nationalists in Europe will have that is the worst threat to Europe. This is why it's important for secular Europeans to deal with Muslims now. If secular Christians deal with secular Europeans deal with the Muslim problem now, then they will take away the impetus for the rise of Christian nationalism in Europe. So, Radio Zelza says, long-term threat to Europe is nihilism. Yes, but nihilism can come from the right or from the left. Right? It can come from Christianity or from, leftist crazies. Or for that matter, from Muslims. But I think that, as I've often said, Europeans will at some point wake up to the Islamic threat if the Islamists get violent, and will wipe them out, and in the process turn Europe fascist. And that, I think, is the long-term threat. Michael, has the right always been racist? They're just a point in political dominance where they can stop hiding it. I don't know if they've always been racist. I don't think so. But certainly the civil rights period was a turning point. A lot of the states that were racist, a lot of the South were Democrats. A lot of the people who were racists in the 1960s were Democrats. And they were upset. Those Democrats were upset by the Democratic Party supporting the civil rights movement. They were upset by liberal Democrats coming down to the South and supporting black, in a sense, emancipation and equal rights for blacks. And that was Nixon's Southern strategy. It was to capture them, to convert them to those racists, to convert them to the Republican Party, and they became a part of the Republican Party. And it looked like, for a long time, I'd say from the mid-'70s until the mid-2010s, that the racism had been suppressed, that generally whites had become a lot less racist, that racism was in decline. and was fading from America, and I think that it was just buried, but it was always there, and it has come out of its hiding place and is being legitimized. And again, I think that Trump did a lot to legitimize it and to make it acceptable to come out onto the surface. Jennifer says, what is Zionism supposed to mean? Does it mean a safe place like Israel for Jews to live, or does it mean a collectivistic Jewish state? It seems to be used in different ways. I think it means different things to different people. For some people, it means a collectivistic Jewish state, and there's definitely a lot of collectivism in Israel. I criticize Israel all the time. I left Israel because of how collectivistic a state it was. But I think the more positive interpretation of Zionism, and I think Zionism as intended by its founder, Theodor Herzl, was a state for the Jews, not a Jewish state. A state for the Jews is a refuge for Jews, a place the Jews can go to, a liberal country that did not discriminate against others, and Israel does not discriminate against Arabs, Christians, against Jews, against Muslims. It does not discriminate against them, so it gives them equal rights. So it's not, in that sense, an ethno-state. The only sense in which the collectivism or the Jewishness, if you will, comes in is an immigration policy. That is, Jews can immigrate to Israel freely. It's open borders for Jews. Others can't. They can still immigrate, but it's very hard and the numbers are small. So it's close to non-Jews for the most part. Not exactly. I mean, you could see in the hostages that Hamas took on October 7th, some of them were Nepalese, some of them were Thai. These are people who come to work in Israel. My parents have two helpers who live with them. One is from Sri Lanka and one is from India. Neither one of them is Jewish. And they're going to live in Israel for a long time. They make money and they send it back home. Zionism is not, again, Theodor Herzl would have viewed it as a refuge for Jews, a state in which Jews are safe, but not a Jewish state in a sense of Jewish law. And I think to a large extent Israel is that. There are people in Israel who would like to make it a Jewish state, that would like to eliminate any separation of state from religion and discriminate against Muslims and Christians. But I think it's still true that the majority in Israel are pro some form of separation, not complete, but a significant form of separation of state from religion and equal rights to all religions. And in that sense, again, I view Israel as a state for Jews, not as a Jewish state. And I think the difference between those two is important. I just criticize Israel. Does that make me an anti-Semite? I don't know. All right. The Oceanist. How long until the right abandons Trump? It's an open secret that Tucker hates him, and Fuentes is very critical of him. Well, I don't think they'll abandon Trump because they view Trump as a vehicle to get their way. So they will stick by Trump as long as Trump is there. He is a way to get them J.D. Vance. Tucker Carlson and J.D. Vance are good friends. And while Nick Fuentes is not supportive of J.D. Vance, maybe he'll be brought around by Tucker Carlson. Whoever becomes the nominee of the Republican Party, Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson will have a lot of say in who that person is. They view Trump as a vehicle, and he's been a very good vehicle for them. So they will continue to support him as long as he's that vehicle that gets them what they want. Liam, are Republicans better locally than nationally? Republican governors tend to run their states better than Democratic governors, but when they run the federal government, their fascism emerges. Well, I mean, you're generalizing. I think the reality is that the governors, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are more mainstream conservatives and less MAGA. Now, there are some MAGA governors out there, and there's some real problems in those states. There's real evil in Texas and in many of the southern states when it comes to things like abortion, for example. Real evil. they do some good things and then they do some really, really, really bad things. So what does it mean that they run their states better? In what sense? Economically? A lot of these southern states are super poor, with really horrible educational attainment. So, right? I'm not convinced that Republican governors are better. I mean, in some states they are, but they tend to be like Yorkins in Virginia. He's a pretty moderate Republican, right? And he's not MAGA. The former governor of Georgia, not MAGA. I mean, I think DeSantis in Florida is a mixture. He's got some good things and he's got some really bad things. In Texas, there's some really bad things and some good things. So it's a mixed bag. Republican governors are mixed bags. And it's not clear that past Republican presidents were fascist. Or even that most Republican senators are such, but most Republican senators have decided that they're going to support Trump no matter what. That is cowardly of them, but that is the reality. Harper Campbell, will you be exposing Harriman before the New Year's Eve show? I don't know. How much money will you give me? I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm in no rush. I like numbers. People like Mark Levin on the right are pushing back against Fuentes. Yeah, but they have no following, they have no base. Isn't the lesson that you can have more influence on the right by being part of it? I don't understand that at all. I mean, who has more influence on the right by being part of it? I mean, and who wants to be part of it? Why would you want to be part of a right that includes Nick Fuentes? And does that? Why would? I mean, if you have rational ideas, wouldn't your audience see right through you that you're betraying those ideas by being in a coalition with Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes? How could you have integrity by being in that coalition? You lose all credibility. James, the GOP is maybe 10, 15 years away from being an explicit Nazi party. Anti-Semitism and racism are being successfully mainstreamed. Listen to J.D. Vance at the Turning Point USA an other day talking about fundamental differences of Christianity and Judaism. The era of Judo-Christianity values are over. Well, I think that's good because it was always unreal Judo-Christian values, as if they were good or as if they were the same, and they're not. But I agree with you. I don't think the GOP is going to become Nazi. I don't think it'll be explicitly Nazi. But I do think the era of Christian nationalism, which is what Leonard predicted in Dim, is upon us. And it's a matter of, 10, 15 years before we have full-on, where the Republican Party is a full-on Christian nationalist party. It's right there. Henry Allen, in his Dim book, Peikoff predicted Christian totalitarianism taking over. Have you spoken to him about this? What's going on today? Does he know about Project 2025 and Fuentes? I have not spoken to him about it. I haven't spoken to him seriously about politics, I think, since 2020. Yeah, I think around 2020 was the last time we had a serious political, philosophical discussion. So no, as I said, we haven't talked about it. Does he know about Project 2025 or Fuentes? Look, Leonard gets, I think, at least last time I talked to him, about this, he got most of his news from Mark Levin and the New York Post. To the extent that they covered it, he would know about it. And Mark Levin is pushing against Nick Fuentes, but I think Mark Levin is probably minimizing the significance of Nick Fuentes and his influence among on the right. And I don't know how much talk there was of Project 2025. So I don't know how much Leonard knows about either one of those things and to what extent it sinks in or the full implication and manifestation of those things sinks in or has been explained to him by anybody. Again, the only person I can think of who might have done it is Mark Levin, but Mark Levin is very mixed on these things. He's not mixed on Nick Fuentes, but his criticism is going to be shallow, and he's not going to emphasize how influential Nick Fuentes is. He's going to downplay that. Oceanist. Yeah, Israel controls the U.S. That's why in the 80s, U.S. Marines stopped Israelis from going to parts in Beirut. Just don't look up how the locals thank the Marines. That all is a little confusing. Yes, it was Ronald Reagan who stopped Israel from going into West Beirut and finishing off Yasser Arafat and his fighters. And the Marines were deployed, and of course the Marines were killed. 244 Marines were killed in their barracks by what became Hezbollah, by the Iranians and Hezbollah. Israel does not control the U.S. If Israel controlled the U.S., Israel would not have been stopped in 1973 from finishing the job versus the Egyptians. Israel would not have been stopped in Beirut in 1983. Israel would not have been stopped to kill Yasser Arafat during the Second Intifada in the early 2000s. And Israel would not have agreed to the ceasefire, which prevented it, was this close to going in and occupying Gaza and slowly dismantling Hamas. The whole war that it's prosecuted against Hamas was to a large extent done based on American rules. Clark says, I don't think Nick Fuentes is a real person. This creature has mastered trolling to a fine art. He must be secretly amazed by how far he's come. Probably, but he's come far. And he is real. And, in either case, the phenomena is real. His following is real. And it's scary. Michael, are Israelis so intense and rude because of trauma from the Holocaust and constantly fighting wars, or because they're more intellectual and have absorbed Kantian collectivist philosophy more deeply? I don't think either one of those are true. I mean, I think they're more intense, I don't know that they're rude. Part of that is the intensity. Because they live in a region that's constantly a war. They don't have time for nonsense. They just want to get on with things. They don't like standing in the queue. They don't like standing in line. That's part of it. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly an element of the collectivism. There's certainly an element of, a zero-sum mentality that comes from years under socialism. That is part of that, but a lot of it has to do with, but it's also, people in the Mediterranean are like this. Heat generates a certain, a certain type of energy when you live in a hot place. It's also because it's a kind of a melting pot of so many different cultures. I mean, people think of, Israel's a monoculture place because they're all Jews. But these Jews have come from all corners of the world, and they bring with them much of the culture of the places they left. So it is really a multicultural place, and it's a melting pot of places, and you get this clash of cultures within Israel. It's very much alive even today, and that's what people don't understand. People say, they don't believe in multiculturalism. No, on the contrary, it's unbelievably multicultural. The Ashkenazi Jews from all parts of Europe, the Sephardic Jews from Northern Africa, the Jews from Iraq and Yemen and Ethiopia, black Jews with skin that's completely black. There are Jews from Central Asia, from Uzbekistan and Afghanistan and areas like that. They're Jews from India. There are even Jews that were born in China. They might not be Chinese, but they were raised in China. And they bring a lot of that And the Jewish cultures in each place were different. The ceremonies were different. The passages, the holidays were celebrated differently. They didn't. So it's a very much a place of mingling and, again, a melting pot of different cultures. And that's part of the intensity, I think. Andrew, the low character of these conservatives stands out. The rank dishonesty and lack of integrity, the pettiness and meanness. What is to gain if they lose their soul? On that, they ignore Christ. Yeah, I mean, these are not smart people. They're manipulative people, just like Trump. These are people that have embraced Trump, who's got the characteristics, the character of a mafia boss as president of the United States. Just that brings them to such a low state that everything else just seems, doesn't seem that difficult. Right? So, so the conservatives have become, I mean, they support a man who is inherently dishonest and has no integrity. So why would they have any? Trump has brought down the Republican Party to his level, and that's what you're getting. Michael, what do you think of Ron DeSantis? I don't think what he's done to cater to MAGA, but Florida is thriving, and he is a very smart, competent leader, paving the way in property tax abolition. Yeah, I mean, the property tax abolition is not as good as I originally thought it was. It's not for second homes. It's up to a certain level. So it's not as good as I thought it was, but it's good. It's cutting taxes. He caters to MAGA in all kinds of ways. There was something that Florida just did. It was just horrific. They banned artificial meat, all kinds of stupid things. So he's a real mixed bag, who I think has not lost some of the better ideas the conservatives used to have, but is trying to mingle it and integrate it with MAGA, and what is left is a mishmash. Liam, how does Milei compare to Pinochet in terms of economic reforms? I think they're very similar. Pinochet went further, partially because he was a dictator and he could. But Pinochet didn't believe in any of the reforms. Pinochet wasn't the driver of the reforms. The drivers of the reforms were the Chicago boys. Pinochet gave them the economic reins out of desperation, not out of agreement or out of any kind of sense that of free markets. So Milei gets all the credit for what he's done. Pinochet does not. Pinochet, again, gave it out of a sense of desperation. The economic reforms are deeper in Chile, but also they did them over a longer period of time. So Milei is just starting. We'll see what happens over the next 2 to 10 years before we compare them. All right, Jacob, submitted the green card application for my wife last week. I hope JD and his supporters feel 5 times the anxiety what we had to go through. Yeah, I mean, that's just horrible that it's so difficult. Just horrible. Hopefully it goes smoothly, and congratulations. Liam, aren't mathematical concepts part of objective reality? Like a perfect circle. Concepts like infinity are important in mathematics, but don't seem to correspond to reality. That's right. So, I mean, mathematical concepts are concepts. They're abstractions. They, those abstractions can be understood in terms of things in reality, like circles, and you can imagine what a perfect circle is versus circles, but mathematical concepts are abstractions of things in reality, yes. But are all of them objective reality? No. I mean, some are and some are not, right? So infinity there's no such thing as infinity. I mean, this is a great question for Harry Binswanger, who's done a lot of work in the philosophy of mathematics. Some mathematical concepts are about relationships. Some mathematical concepts, corresponds to mathematics. I mean, ultimately, it's all reducible to reality, but it requires multiple steps because some mathematical concepts are high-level abstractions. But all of them are reducible to phenomena in reality. Michael, while both left and right hate the Constitution, they use it when opposing party is in power to limit their power, freedom by accident and convenience rather than principle. Yes, absolutely. So they'll both use the Constitution to the extent that it supports their agenda, and they'll be mad at the Constitution to the extent that it restricts their ability to do the things that they would want to do. Crypto fanatic, if economy and state are separate, should incorporation laws exist? Yes, just like marriage law should exist, and there's a bunch of others. It's just a shorthand for contracts. Incorporation could exist without incorporation laws, but incorporation laws are an efficient mechanism, and given that these particular types of contracts are going to be adjudicated in courts, in state courts, a standardized format for them is a huge advantage. So having incorporation laws makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense that they're at the state level, and there's some competition between states in terms of what incorporation laws each state has, and corporations can move from one to the other, and then the courts interpret them. So yeah, absolutely. There's nothing statist or interventionist about incorporation laws. They're just setting a particular type of contract that people can either use or not use. They can try to form different types of corporations with different types of contracts and ignore the incorporation laws. That would be fine. Michael, since America is Israel's only ally, doesn't Netanyahu have to bow down to Trump? Well, if he thinks that that is true, that it's the only ally, I'm not sure that's true. But if he thinks that's true, and if he thinks that Trump will sever relationships with Israel or penalize him significantly if he doesn't agree with him, I don't think that will happen. I don't think Trump will just say, if you don't do what I tell you, we're going to walk away. Now, that might happen one day, but I don't think America is in that position right now. So I think Netanyahu has a lot of leeway to say no to Trump if he wants to, because Trump understands, or at least some of the people around Trump understand, that America needs Israel. Michael says, can you try and get on Logan Paul's podcast? He's had Peter Schiff on and interviews all the famous people who've moved to Puerto Rico. I mean, I guess I'm not famous because he hasn't contacted me, but I will try. So I will flag that and I will try. The Oceanist, I know it was a while ago, but Tucker covering the Russian grocery store reminds me of Michael Moore's coverage of Cuba. Excellent comparison, absolutely. I didn't think of it when I talked about Tucker's covering the grocery store, but you're absolutely right. The parallel is striking. All right, Crypto Fanatic. Do you think any forms of infrastructure like roads, bridges, airports, ports, rail, electric grid, pipeline, should be government owned at all or all be private? All be private. I think everything should be private. I mean, a few military bases and a few buildings that the government needs in order to run things, that's it. Everything else should be private. And even those should probably be private and leased to the government. Tom, having more than one passport is not a bad thing. Patriotism does not mean you should only have the ability to live in one country. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. You can be a patriot and also realize that, your country can go bad pretty quickly and you'll want to go somewhere else. You can be a patriot and still want the convenience of having a separate passport that allows you to travel easily through other countries and around the world. An American passport, for example, today is not a particularly good passport. A lot of countries around the world require Americans to get visas. Having some European Union passports are allow for much easier movement around the world without visas. And a lot of the reason countries put visas on Americans is because America puts visas on them, so they reciprocate. So yes, I think getting a second or third or fourth passport is all good and should be encouraged, even if you're a patriot. Enric, rather than left and right coalescing on environmentalism, they look to be coming together on anti-Semitism. Shall we soon find from both parties anti-Semitic leaders and president? I still think that anti-Semitism as a phenomena is at the fringes and the margins. It's millions of people, but it's not the mainstream, and we'll see if it gets mainstreamed. Whereas I do think environmentalism is mainstreamed. We saw that when MAGA freaked out over the idea that one of the senators had to privatize federal land in the West and use it for development, particularly for housing. And MAGA freaked out, as did the environmentalists, and they showed that they're very environmentalist. And I think environmentalism is still much more of a mainstream topic. We'll see how all of this evolves. We'll see how all of this evolves and how big the anti-Semitism becomes and how widespread it becomes, how mainstream it becomes. It's definitely being mainstreamed into the Republican conservative movement, into MAGA, but whether it grows beyond that, we'll see. Peter, Christian nations in history, Frankish and Holy Roman Empire, Calvin's Geneva, Cromwell's England, precisely what the Founding Fathers repudiated. Yes, they rejected all of those. They rejected they rejected and were really upset by the religious wars, the 30-year war, the 100-year war, Protestants and Catholics killing one another. They suddenly rejected Calvin's Geneva and the persecution of people who had different notions of Christianity. Absolutely, Peter. I agree with you completely. Andrew, love is stronger than hate if created by oneself by rational means. Is there even such a thing as altruistic love, love through self-sacrifice? No, I don't think there's such a thing as altruistic love. I think to the extent that people love, to that extent they are being self-interested. And people are compartmentalized and mixed, but to the extent that they love, they're being self-interested. All right, we've got a few remaining, and then I need to get to bed. And Pokey, why is the moral always the practical? What is the link between the two? And are there cases you can think of where this does not hold? No, I mean, I think it holds. It holds in a rational society and over the long run. It doesn't hold in an irrational society necessarily. Sometimes the moral can lead to death and destruction, and in an irrational, in a world dominated by irrationality. I mean, I'd have to give a long answer, and I don't have the voice. I'm losing my voice, and I don't have the time for it, and it's late. But I'll say this. I mean, where does morality come from? How do we learn moral truths? We learn moral truths by two processes, fundamentally. One is identifying the nature, i.e., the practical nature of man. What is man? How does man function in the world? And that's how we get, he's a rational being, and reason being, a cardinal value. And, what makes it possible for man to live successfully in the world, which is an empirical, inductive, evaluation. So one looks at the world and see that rationality, reason, is man's means of survival. You see that. That's an inductive truth. And reason both logically requires, for example, honesty, because reason requires fact, But also, when one observes in reality, honesty works and dishonesty doesn't. So the whole way in which the objectivist morality is derived is by looking at what works. And here, what we mean by what works is what leads to human survival. So the moral, in a sense, is derived from the practical. It's derived from, looking at the world, observing reality, and figuring out what right and wrong is. What right is that which leads to human flourishing. What's wrong is that which destroys it. So, it's built in. The moral is the practical is the moral, is built into objectivism. So the irrational, we can observe, is impractical. And part of the reason it's evil is, it's evil because it's impractical. Because it leads to bad outcomes for you as an individual. So it's circular in that sense. Right? Mpoki, should a defending nation ever take any precautions to avoid civilian casualties in a case where the cost is minimal? Why or why not? Well, there's no reason to gratuitously kill people. Human life has value. So there's no reason to gratuitously do it. So if there's no purpose in killing people, then you shouldn't kill them. And to that extent, you avoid civilian casualties when the civilian casualties are not necessary for victory. But in any situation where civilian casualties are necessary for victory, are necessary to a victory and at a minimal cost to yourself and a minimal cost of your own people's lives, then you should not take precautions. So the standard is the extent to which it's going to demand a sacrifice of your people or not. It's going to demand a sacrifice of you or not. It's going to prevent you from achieving your goal or not. That's the standard by which you measure it. Tyler says, hi, Yaron, I really enjoyed Peikoff's History of Philosophy lectures. Yeah, they're great. I noticed the Kant section was missing from the book version. Any idea why it was left out? Just curious. Was Kant left out? I think because Leonard asked that the book version only include part one, the pre-Kantian. I think I don't know. I think if I recall, and granted, I might recall wrong, but I think if I recall, he said that he was a lot more confident in the course of the truth of the pre-Kantian, and that he wasn't as confident that everything he said was accurate regarding the more modern philosophers. I think the whole thing is fantastic, but that is, if I recall, that is what he said. So that's why he only wanted it in writing, the pre-Kantian segment, part one. But luckily, you can still get it in audio. And Pokey, what's your take on IP, intellectual property, in a free state? If it's a natural right, why does it expire? Wouldn't permanent IP paralyze innovation, since all progress builds on prior ideas? Yes, that's why it expires. So it should expire, but there should be a period. It's a form of property, and the property owner should have the ability to profit from his property for a period. Ayn Rand has a very good essay on this in Capitalism, Not Knowing the Ideal. I encourage you to read it. She goes into great lengths in defending her position about why copyright, IP generally, is valid, and why the length of time shouldn't be forever, and why having a specific length of time is not arbitrary. It's about It's about the lifetime of the producer. It's also about the ability to profit from that property before it becomes goes into the public domain and goes to aid in the process of ideas building on ideas. But read the essay, much better explanation there. Andrew, what do you think of the criticism of the objectivist morality, that its focus on independent judgment and consistency demand too much of people? I mean, I don't feel like it's too much. I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of people who embrace it and do it and are fine with it. So I'm not sure. I've never seen that criticism. It requires work. It requires being independent. It requires having self-esteem. It requires not caving to the mob. That all requires effort, but it's doable for every human being. I know people of all kinds of intellectual abilities that have embraced that idea. And even before objectivism, there were people who embraced independent judgment and stood up to the mob. So I don't understand why that is something that's beyond people's reach. Necessarily, it is beyond people's reach because they choose not to embrace it. Evan, what do you think about altruism and a group of infantry in battle? A unit is much more effective if everyone has each other's back to the point where they're willing to sacrifice and risk for each other. So I think that altruism is destructive for a unit like that. I think a unit in battle functions much, much better if they all understand why it's in their self-interest to function as a unit. It's just like a team, like in teamwork in a business, it doesn't require you to accept the collective mind, collective consciousness, because there is none. It requires you to be an independent thinker and contribute to the team and work with others to improve and enhance ideas. The same thing is true in battle. You want independent thinkers who understand why they're there, who understand why the unit has to function together, and who have a real, authentic camaraderie, friendship with the other people around them. Now, I don't think that a good unit in battle requires people to sacrifice to one another. So, for example, you're storming a position, and the guy on your right gets hit. What do? Do you continue storming the position, or do you go take care of the guy who's been hit? Well, victory demands that you continue storming the position, and afterwards you go take care of your buddy who got hit. But if your focus is completely on your buddy, then you stop the advance, and you take care of the wounded, and you forget about winning the war. So it's not at all clear to me that sacrifice in that sense is required. Risk-taking is required, but you signed up for the military. This is why military should be voluntary. You signed up for the military. You signed up to take risk. Not to sacrifice, but to take risk for the values that you believe in and for the people in your team. I don't consider that a sacrifice. And again, you have to think about, what do you want this team to do? What is required to win a battle, to win a war, to win a skirmish? And what's required is everybody thinking, everybody being an independent thinker, but within the context of a team, within the context of a group that is trying to achieve a goal together. And that means sometimes you have to just follow orders. That means that you're going to take risks. That means that you have to watch what your other soldiers are doing and yes, cover them because that's part of the mission and that's part of how you attain the goal. So, but it's not a sacrifice. You're aiming towards a goal that's very, very, very important to you. This is why you volunteered to serve in this military. Again, one of the reasons I believe in voluntary military service, not in conscription. Chris, what did Ayn Rand think of Norman Rockwell? What do you think of Rockwell? Why was Norman Rockwell art so disliked? Is his artwork idealistic or overly sentimental? So I think she thought of, I don't know exactly what she thought of Rockwell. I vaguely recall that there's something there. I mean, look, Rockwell is an illustrator. He's not a painter. He's a borderline artist because his stuff is postery. It's illustrations. It's very in your face, and in that sense, yeah, it's sentimental. But there's a lot of good art that's sentimental. Rockwell is a good illustrator, but he's not a great artist. I don't know why it was disliked. It wasn't disliked. It was actually liked a lot. It made the covers of magazines. It was all over the place. And remember, it was covers of magazines. Most of his paintings were covers of magazines, which, again, that's illustration. That's not art. It's not fine art. The themes are very obvious. There's no sophistication. It's in your face in a way that art should not be. So I think I enjoy Norman Rockwell. I think a lot of his stuff is fun. It's funny. It's fun. Some of it's idealistic and good. Like I love the one where the guy is standing up. The free speech one is very good. Rockwell generally was kind of a New Deal Democrat. So he illustrated much of Roosevelt's New Deal ideals. He's a naturalist. He portrays, for the most part, man as he is. He portrays scenes out of daily life. Again, part of what makes him not that interesting, but kind of fun and enjoyable. I wouldn't hang a Norman Rockwell painting on my wall, but I don't mind. I enjoy seeing his stuff and thumbing through a book of his work and smiling and enjoying it, but it's a superficial enjoyment. Shazbach, to love is to value, Atlas shrugged, a certain person's speech, not to be mentioned because we don't want to give anything away. Yes, to love is to value. Love is an expression of one's highest value. It's a manifestation of one's highest value. All right, last question, as I'm losing my voice. I understand Rand's idea of self-interest, but why can't a gang be self-interested within their world? Their interest is making money and exploiting. Well, because a gang cannot be happy. A gang cannot flourish qua gang. It can only, so a group can only flourish to the extent its individuals flourish. So at the base of a gang, of a group is individuals. And if they succeed by exploiting and stealing and cheating and robbing, they succeed materially. But all of that behavior is destructive spiritually. It destroys their soul. It destroys their integrity. It destroys their ability to be moral as individuals. And again, happiness and flourishing can only be achieved as individuals. So a gang is not a thing. A gang is just a bunch of individuals committing crimes together. And because they're committing crimes, because they're violating rational principles, as individuals, they cannot flourish and they cannot be happy. And they suffer the consequences. Live by the sword, die by the sword. All right. Thank you, guys. Sorry for the technical problem in the middle. I'm glad we recovered. I'm glad you all stuck with it. Thank you for joining me. Thanks, Troy, for the 500 Australian. Really, really appreciate that. Thanks to all the other, Michael and all the other supporters. We had a lot of $50 contributors. Thank you to the super chatters. Thank you to the stickers. I will see you, I'm not sure when. We'll play it day by day. But at the latest on Saturday. But I'm going to be traveling all this week in Europe. Hopefully I'll see some of you tomorrow in Vienna. Bye, everybody.